Most food and drink brands treat their flavor name as a marketing decision, something that sounds exciting, stand out off the shelf, make consumers want to pick it up. And that's understandable, but here's the problem. When the name on the pack creates expectation the flavor can't actually meet, the consumer buy it once and never come back. And your brand almost never finds out why. By the end of this episode, you will know exactly how to check whether your flavor naming is earning you repeat purchase or quietly killing it. Hi there, I'm Manon, a food scientist and flavor expert, and in this podcast, I share everything I've learned from helping food and drink brands choose the right flavors to get more repeat purchase and stay on retailers' shelf. So let me start with something I think a lot of founders understand intuitively, but don't fully think through when it comes to flavor naming. There are two completely different moments that decide the future of your brand. The first is the purchase decision, and the second is the repeat purchase decision. And most brands only really invest in one of them. The first purchase is driven by what the consumers see on the shelf. The packaging, the design, the flavor name, the way the product presents itself. That's what gets something into the basket. But the repeat purchase is driven entirely by what the product actually tastes like. And those two things, the visual promise and the taste experience, they need to align for the business to work properly. If the flavor doesn't deliver on what the packaging promised, you lose that consumer at the very first hurdle, and you probably never get them back. And this is where flavor naming becomes so important. And also where a lot of brands, I think, underestimate what they're actually doing when they choose the name of their food and drink product. Let me give you an example. When you write vanilla on the pack, that's clear, relatively broad expectation. So when you write vanilla ice cream, vanilla cupcake, you've set the highest bar of all. Because the consumers have tasted vanilla ice cream hundreds of times in their life. They know exactly what it smells like, they have their favorite brand and product in mind, they know what it feels like, they know what it tastes like. And your product now has to compete with that memory. And that's the promise you are making. Maybe you're not fully realizing it, but this is what you're doing. The more evocative and specific the name, the more precise the expectation, and the less room there is for the product to fall short. So what happens when there is a gap? Well, in most cases, nothing visible. Consumers don't leave necessarily detailed reviews online, they don't necessarily send you an email or a message on your Instagram. Most of the time, they just stop buying your product quietly. And then you start seeing the result. The product sits on the shelf, the sales data start to soften and just slow down. And everyone is trying to figure it out what went wrong when actually the answer was there from the beginning. And the answer lies in the gap between what the packaging promised and what the consumer experienced. And I felt it personally as a consumer. I remember I was picking up some savory snacks, I think that was crisps, and it was a very specific name. I think it was something like Sunday roast with all of the trimmings, or maybe it was like a Christmas dinner with all of the trimmings, one of these two. But the name was very specific and very evocative for me. So when I picked up that bag of crisps, I had already all of my expectations in my head, except that it tasted like generic meat, just meat flavor. It didn't taste like the turkey, the gravy. It really didn't have the depth and the complexity of the name. And I remember I was thinking, are you fucking taking me for an idiot? I was quite cross because the bag of crisps was more expensive than the other ones. I have picked up that bag of crisps because of the flavor promise, and they didn't deliver. So for me, that was a goodbye. I will never buy this bag of crisps ever again. Nothing worse than spending money, something more expensive, on something that overpromises and underdeliver. Most of the time, there's nothing malicious about it. Some brands, I know it is malicious about it. It's about saving costs. But most of the time, there is a logical explanation. So, of course, when you're in the middle of the launch, you're focused on getting visible, noticed, and getting people to buy your product. So the flavor name becomes a marketing tool rather than be accurate on what the product actually tastes like. So what can you do about it? What I would recommend is to run a structured taste session, either with your target consumers if you don't have consumers yet, or your existing consumers before you start doing anything on the packaging. And the key to making this work and making it objective is how you set up that test. When you recruit people for the session, keep the brief completely generic. If you give them something and say, hey, it tastes like chocolate, what do you think? And if you tell them, hey, it's a chocolate brownie, what do you think? Again, they're going to be biased. They're going to anticipate, they're going to look for the name, which is not necessarily what is the most revealing on how your product actually tastes like. Remember, here you want to be as honest as possible and describing what your product really tastes like. So, for example, either you're working on a chocolate product, on a caramel, on a chicken piri-piri product, whatever it is, keep it very generic, saying, for example, this is a chocolate product, this is a caramel product. So don't mention the name, just the category of the flavor. Let them taste. You can even give them different options if you want, but give them a multiple choice answer. So if we go back to chocolate, you have, does this product for you taste like A, chocolate, B, chocolate brownie, C, chocolate fudge cake? These are examples. Then you ask them to explain their answer. Why have they chosen answer B rather than A and C? So what flavor did they actually pick up? What is there? What they feel is missing? Because if your pack says is a chocolate fudge cake and your consumer consistently pick just is tastes like chocolate, then it tells a lot about what your product actually tastes like and not what you want your product to taste like. And then you have a decision to make. So you can either adjust the flavor profile to close the gap between what the product delivers and what the name promises. Or you can adjust the name to honestly reflect what the product actually tastes like. And the name that is honest builds trust with the consumer. And the name that isn't, even if it sounds very exciting on shelf, create disappointment and mistrust. So here's your challenge for this week. I want you to do exactly what I explained earlier. Pick one of your products you think is underperforming and you don't really know why. Send your product, again, with a generic flavor category to your current customers to ask them to help you with your NPD project. Give them the multiple choices answer and again ask them to explain. If they can film themselves, that is a bonus because you can also see their body language, how they react. Do they frown or do they like, popping up and just opening up their body because they really like it. The body language says actually a lot when it's about tasting. Then you can do that with 10, 15 people. It doesn't need to be 100 of them. And then you look and you compare what they say compared to what you wanted to call the product. And then look at their answers and look what you wanted to write on your packaging. If there is a gap, that could explain why your sales are dropping, why maybe this SKU is not performing as well as the others. It may be also because the taste is not right, but by asking them, you will also have this answer. And if something you're working through and you're not sure where to start, what question to ask, this is the kind of work I do with my clients. I can help you understand what your product is actually delivering at the sensory level and making sure your flavor strategy is working for your business and not against it. You can find all of the details on my website. I will leave the link in the description. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!